Shareholder activism and investor activism has been virtually absent in India until recently. But in the last few years, you have started to hear of activist shareholders and investors raise their voice and raise questions around decisions taken by managements and promoters. Take, for instance, the Children's Fund, which forced the Coal India management and indeed the government to sit up and take notice. Or for that matter, Veritas, which has put many a corporate management on the back foot recently. While the rhetoric is rising, as Nikhil Inamdar reports, the ability to bring about change has not really increased because laws and regulations simply don't support minority shareholders in India.
August 1st, 2012, TCI, Coal India's largest minority shareholder, dragged the Navratna to the courts for breach of fiduciary duties and abuse of shareholders. August 7th, 2012, Canada-based research firm Veritas strikes again after scathing reports on RIL, DLF and RCOM, says India Bulls is bilking India. Two examples amid a spate of recent instances where shareholder activism has come to the fore. And when shareholders haven't been on a charge, it's been the analyst community and brokerage houses that have raised tough questions. With CLSA, for instance, strongly rebuking Infosys' financial performance in an open letter in April this year. These recent instances of dissent are in sharp contrast to the past, where investors or even minority shareholders rarely avoided concerns about major management decisions.
By and large, what you've seen is, you had a trend of rather rosy reports being written about various kinds of companies. And the number of reports that are critical about companies in India is a very, very small percentage. So to that extent, it's a positive. It brings out concerns that investors need to have about companies.
Taking this crusade a step further on behalf of mutual funds, HNIs and FIIs have been proxy advisory firms like Institutional Investor Advisory Services India Limited and InGovern, who've built an unrelenting investor protection campaign in the last 2 years. InGovern, for instance, claims to have made voting recommendations on proposals of restructuring and director appointments at over 500 shareholder meetings since it was launched in 2010. But despite this sustained operation, bringing about change has been a slow process, say these advisories. For instance, early this year in February, more than 45% of minority shareholders voted against or abstained in protest of the amalgamation of 3 unlisted entities with AstroNobel India. In the same month, there was a barrage of protests at the Vedanta annual general meeting against a complex restructuring to merge Sesagoa and Sterlite. But despite the opposition, both the resolutions were passed by majority, as legally shareholders have voting rights only to the extent of their holding.
It's not that we are here and we switched on the light and everything is going to be okay. Our view is that, look, this is a glacial and a slow journey.
Instances of minority shareholder rights being shortchanged often come to the fore during mergers and acquisitions, related party transactions, when families split and when companies are bought and sold. But shareholders are often mute spectators to keyboard decisions, with resolutions swiftly passed with an absurd symbolic show of hands.
It's here that the role of independent directors becomes crucial. Under Clause 49 of the listing agreement, 50% of the board of private companies and a third of the board of PSUs is expected to consist of independent directors, while the regulation is followed on paper.
And Shri Gupta.
The appointment process is based on a majority vote of promoters, thus putting their independence and ability to challenge a management's decision in doubt. In several other countries, regulations mandate that boards have a nominating committee consisting of non-executive and independent directors who then nominate independent directors of a company. This ensures that managements and independent directors remain at arm's length. Veteran journalists like Sucheta Dalal, who studied corporate governance for years, says unless regulation is strengthened and the power of the collective is used like it was by institutional investors in opposing the merger of Metas into Satyam, which eventually led to the scam being unearthed, nothing much will change.
How can investors ever be protected? We have serious issues, starting with the fact that the regulator does nothing. What does the Ministry of Company Affairs do? Today they get away, okay? Because we investors keep quiet, or the few people who are making a noise are too few and far between. We need a larger group of people holding the regulator accountable.
In fact, even those within the regulatory sphere agree that there are structural issues that need to be addressed and laws re-looked at to enhance investor protection and redressal mechanisms. And while SEBI has swung into action on a few counts, like making it mandatory for promoters to have a 25% free float to increase public shareholding, the regulator is not empowered enough to bring about dramatic changes without parliamentary approval.
I think there's a fundamental structural problem with investor protection in India, particularly for issues where SEBI is empowered to act, and that's with the design of the statutory design itself, which bars investors from filing a civil suit, for instance. So I think a useful supplement to SEBI action has been prohibited, and I think there is a need, first of all, to dismantle this so that the powers of SEBI can be supplemented by powers of the investor.
But the new Companies Bill promises to address many of these issues, including allowing class action suits against companies, stricter codes for appointment and rotation of independent directors and auditors, and more stringent disclosure norms. While the Parliamentary Standing Committee's report on the Companies Bill has been tabled in the ongoing monsoon session, it remains to be seen whether the bill that's been delayed for 5 years is finally passed.
A series of crises, scams and scandals has left the faith of investors shaken in the system. In the 20 years of liberalization, the population of retail investors has gone down from 20 million to 11 million. Bringing them back and reassuring them of good corporate governance will take a collaborated effort not just from independent directors and activist shareholders, but also from the government and the regulators. In Mumbai, Nikhil Anandar, NDTV Profit.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display. Full screen view. Faster response time. And Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.